this year, specifically toward transportation and bikes, is not significant compared to the money that we spend overall within Public Works. And this is sort of a distribution of where that money does get spent. Some of the items, for example, storm system improvements, we have trash capture devices that are going in. Those are required by law that we meet our trash capture mandates, and we're spending, basically $1.5 million a year installing trash capture systems. So some of those capital projects are also driven by laws and regulations. You can go on to the next slide. This is the 2021 funding. So this is what was approved last year in the 2-year budget cycle for the upcoming fiscal year. Same sort of distribution roughly of costs. We do have a high priority placed on us by the City Council for our paving program and our Smooth Streets program. We're about to sell $25 million in bonds to fund that for the next 3 years. We're going to be spending a lot of money up on paving. And also some money on traffic improvement. And we have some general fund money going towards the sidewalk program and the lighting program still. So our high voltage lighting program is still being funded out of that fund. Overall, on these discretionary funds for next fiscal year, about $13 million in total, almost $14 million. The next slide. And again, sort of the visual on this for next year between paving, obviously represents the bulk of our budget for next year. And I think that's it. The last slide. So we think that, what we want to point out is that we understand the concern that has been expressed about implementation. And for us, it's really a matter of implementing priorities that were given to us with the money that we have. We have several funding sources that are available. And we do the best, obviously, to get the projects implemented that we can. We have a lot of priorities: road paving, flood control, the high voltage program, bridge maintenance, sidewalk repair, and the bottom line is we can't fund them all. So direction from the Sustainability Infrastructure Commission regarding the importance of this is useful. If this is a program that you guys feel strongly needs to be and should be funded, can get carried forward to the City Council as we talk about the upcoming years of prioritization of the different projects. So with that, I think we'll entertain any questions.
Great, thank you very much. Why don't we bring it to commissioners for clarifying questions?
Thank you for your report. Very thorough and very accurate. The one thing that was always a concern that if we had areas around town where we had like 3 blocks for bike lane and then it would stop and then we'd have another gap in a bike lane. I've always wanted us to have the most bang for the buck on the biggest places that get the continuous without having a roadblock, a fail, a stop. Because it'd be great to just be able to keep going, and then connect the dots later. But like we were just told, the money's not here, so work on the biggest projects we can. That was always a priority that I've always looked at and say, but again, the report is fabulous. Thank you.
Okay, I have a few questions here. I want to go back to the funding aspect. Matt, you mentioned for fiscal year 2021, there'll be about $5 million I saw for pavement management. When pavement is done, is this an opportunity to also include any of the updates to the, I'm going to call it, by the way, the micromobility plan. And I'll go back and talk a little bit about that later. But when you do the pavement at roughly $5 million, is there money there to also incorporate the bike or the micromobility projects for the street?
So the answer is both yes and no. Yes, in the sense that if we are repaving as either a part of our program, a pavement management program, which is our non-failed streets program, right, the less intensive one, or as part of our smooth streets program, we obviously have to restripe and we have to restore the striping that's there. If we can make improvements as part of that restoration process to improve the bike lanes to meet the objectives of the bicycle master plan, we do. If the bicycle master plan calls for a class 4 bike lane in a certain location and we have budget to do a slurry seal under our pavement management program, the pavement management program can't fund the creation of a class 4 bike lane. It might be able to contemplate funding some striping to help create a new lane, if you will, but it won't be building the infrastructure necessary for a fully physically separated lane. So depending on the situation, I mean, we certainly try to take advantage of that overlap. That is, Sue Ellen sits in and she can tell you how tedious they are, the design review meetings, when we're going over the paving plans for each of the projects. Mm-hmm. So the answer is yes, we try to take advantage of the dollars as best we can.
Okay, all righty. Thank you on that. Going back to what is funded, what the current funding is for the, I'm going to call it micromobility and pedestrian projects, which is roughly about $50,000 out of a $13.8 million budget there. Other sources of money or funding that I know Sue and I had shared with you before this meeting, and I would just be curious on your feedback. One is, we have the developers' impact fees. And I don't know whether, there has been discussion about increasing that, and possibly, whether it's increased or not, can a portion of that money be sequestered for the micromobility and PED plan?
Yeah, the traffic impact fee actually has designated as a potential candidate is bike and pedestrian projects. The issue with the traffic impact fee right now is we're actually in the negative, and will be in the negative for some years to come, because that money has been allocated to the grade separation project. As you know or may not know, the city committed $12 million to that project. So in order to get that project, we actually had to go in the negative to fund that. Of course, that's a big benefit to the community in east-west connectivity, safety, and also to the Bay Meadows neighborhood as well. So that's the issue with the traffic impact fee. Yes, we are taking a look at that fee to hopefully alter it somewhat to maybe increase those fees to the developers. We think there's opportunity to do that. We're kind of at the beginning stages of that effort, so it will take a little bit of time and will coincide with the general plan update as well. So,
okay, all righty. And let me just kind of put out another idea on funding for this plan. Eventually we will have rented micromobility devices, e-scooters, e-skateboards, e-bikes, and they will be rented. Some will be privately owned. But, something maybe for the city to consider, and I'd be just curious on your thoughts on this, is, those devices will be using this path that we are talking about tonight. And, possibly, and that is adding a fee that would be then dedicated to funding this micromobility path, because those devices will be using that path. And I just want to leave it out there. I don't know if there's any comments on the possibility or even the thought or how that would even be done.
yeah, I suppose what you're talking about is a user fee.
We can call it a user fee or something, or bike,
Yeah, I mean,
or plan or maintenance fee, or.
I'm not sure if it would. We could consider that, of course. I'm not sure how it would align with. I have my bike, I own my bike, and I use the same facility, but I don't pay anything for it, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not looking. It's not. I'm not saying we don't have to answer it tonight. I'm just kind of putting it out on the table as a possible source of funding
Sure.
from devices that will be used, and it's a way to capture revenue to support.
We'd like to have any source of funding. Believe me, we don't create these plans not desiring to see them through, but you could see the challenges before us with the funding and the council priorities that we need to meet. So yeah, anything we could do to increase any kind of funding for our capital program would be great.
Sure, okay. And I have, do you?
If I could just add on to that, if you are also considering the same type of user fee for the commercial operation, at this point, City Council has not opted to extend a permit to a commercial operator for e-scooter share. We do have the shared mobility permit program, but at this time, there's only one permit available for a bike share operator. At this point, e-scooter operation is still not allowed on the city right-of-way.
Oh, yeah, I know. I'm talking about when this is all available. It's there will be e-scooters, there will be e-bikes, e-skateboards, all of this. I see it in San Francisco. That's where I work. I see it in other towns. So this is a source outside in the future. And once again, they are going to benefit from this plan, and it is a potential revenue source. Okay, I have one more question, if that's okay. Okay. I think looking at this as a micromobility plan, I think is important. It's not only a bike plan, we can call it a bike and micromobility plan, but a micromobility plan is a different way of thinking. And because we are encompassing, and they will be here, these personal transportation devices, be they owned or rented, will be here and will be used. And I think, by the way, I think referring to this and kind of thinking, creating this ethos and this kind of way to think, I think is important. And I say this because in terms of grant writing, I think it's a way to potentially differentiate the city in terms of writing grants. That is we're not only talking about bicycles, we're talking about other micromobility devices. I also, besides, it's a way to, I'll say, accommodate the transportation needs of our residents, because they will be coming in many different forms or fashions. So you'll hear me consistently refer to this as micromobility or bike and micromobility. But with all that said, Sue Ellen, I'd like you to just help me just understand, how could this be implemented? For example, is there standard, would we have signage that would be relevant for e-scooters as well as bicycles? Or, and I'm just going to focus in on the signage because that's something that's kind of a bit tangible. Is there symbology available that is designated for, I'll just say, e-devices, e-transportation devices, along those lines? But how could this be, what would this look like if we were to build it out? I'm just trying to get a sense.
I think I'll have to defer to Megan to help us there because she's more of an expert in terms of wayfinding.
Yes, I will say that per the last commission meeting, we did update the wayfinding appendices to include that we should be including micromobility in that. So that is a text change. Regarding your question about signage in specific, I think all of this is so new that there aren't necessarily standards in the same way that there is for bicycle infrastructure. So that would be something new that that we would need to look into. So I think I'll just leave it at that. We do include it as text in the plan, but once implementation begins, we'd have to look into that further.
Okay, all right, thank you.
And I can add to that, for the California Manual on Uniform Traffic Control Devices, the MUTCD, there are no micromobility signs in there that are standard at this point. And when we're installing signage, we would want it to be standard. I'm not certain of when or if an update to that manual is coming out, but that is another consideration that we need to keep in mind.
Right. Okay. No, and I mean, all of this is important because obviously we're ahead of the curve, which is fine. This is where we want to be. And I just wanted to kind of get a sense of tangibility or context. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't have any questions, but I have some comments and input that I'd like to give, but I'll wait till after the public.
Great. I have a couple questions. First of all, I think this plan is a great improvement in terms of the clarity, so I really appreciate that very much. With regards to the 2011 plan and the progress from that plan, can you give us a sense of percent complete in rough terms, either in mileage or in dollars, to get a sense of, what the progress was in the plan? Because it's a little difficult to tell from the report.
I understand that. We've done analysis on what's been completed in terms of number of projects, but not in terms of lane miles or dollar amount or anything like that. So we could look into that and get back to you. There's 9 high priority projects that have been completed, and 8 that are in progress. 5 have also been included in the 2020 plan. Again, many at the higher classification of facility. But that's the level that we looked at. We looked at it by project, not necessarily in terms of percentage.
All right, that's fine. And thinking about this plan and the investment, the disjunction we have in investment on the one hand need and where we are in terms of funding availability, I imagine that from the standpoint of our transportation capital improvement plan, that there's been a lot of deferred projects coming out of the Great Recession, and that really kind of sets the context here. But can you comment on that, either Brad or Matt?
Yeah, I mean, we have significant projects that we try to get done. For instance, I don't remember if it was the last city council meeting. I think it may have been where we gave them an update about the interchange at Peninsula Avenue and 101. That's been ongoing for some time, that study, and we're going to actually need to add some money for that to get through the environmental document phase because of some additional traffic studies we've had to do to kind of move it along. So, what we thought we might have an opportunity for some Measure A funding to distribute to things like the bike plan, now go to that project to get that project fully funded and keep moving. So obviously there's all kinds of important aspects, and it's just challenging to get the funding that we need. So again, the council's has been having for years, 10 or 12 years, a focus on paving, and that's why Measure S is done. Funding that, we'll be funding that. Also the North Shore View flood area. So there's another $25 million in bonds being sold to remove that area out of the floodplain. So yeah, the list is long, and of course, we're getting our grade separations done. So it's challenging to say the least.
That's understandable. At the same time, I imagine, have quite a detailed plan looking forward in terms of the projects that we're looking to complete, and we must have a sense of the overlap between those plans and the rapid implementation opportunities that the plan identifies. Do we, and could we, there must be a way of quantifying that and saying, okay, out of this rapid improvement project list, we think the existing roadwork plans over the next 5 years will cover 25% of that, something on that order.
Yeah, I mean, once this plan is adopted, it's similar to what we do with our sewer program, the Clean Water Program. We try to align the road work and the sewer work up together. So the sewer work goes in before the road work happens, so that we're not digging up a brand new street. Similarly, with this plan, we would want to look at our plans for improved pavement throughout the city and see how we can line improvements up towards getting this done, similar to what Matt had said. Mm-hmm. So especially if it's striping, we can do it as part of the project. But if it's something larger than that, we could look towards funding in other mechanisms to do that kind of in alignment with those projects as well.
Sure, and I guess what I'm getting at is it would be great to be able to communicate to the community, okay, because if you just look at these budgets, right, you're like, oh my gosh, you're only putting $50,000 and this plan's going nowhere, right? But on the other hand, if you look at the other things and you say, well, actually, we're going to get done X% out of these other buckets because there's work happening that aligns there, that would actually be really helpful information. And maybe something we can consider, having back here so that we can get that out into the community in some reasonable time frame.
Yeah, I think as we want to come before this commission a couple of times a year to update you on this bike master plan, and so that could be something we can incorporate the next time around as we have time to evaluate that, for sure.
That would be very helpful.
And what I want to make one clarifying comment about what you're seeing before you, this table. This was what was proposed last year in the 5-year capital program. We do a 5-year capital program each year. This was the second year. The first year is really the only year that gets approved. So this funding for 2021 has not been approved until we get that approved by council in June. So this may look a little bit different from what you're looking at now, but I think the main thing is the big programs that the council and the priorities the council has really utilize the bulk of the money.
Sure. And I imagine that there will be more detail going to council in terms of what's under the hood on this. Would that be an opportunity to also include what percentage of the rapid implementation projects could be covered?
Yeah, we should be able to work something up in regards to that. I mean, we have on our website the Smooth Streets web page that shows the paving projects we're going to do. So that's the Measure S money. Some of the other money we may not know a couple years out the exact location of where we're actually going to spend those dollars as far as road work goes, but we do know somewhat. For the first couple of years.
Okay, that would be great, and then perhaps that information could come back here as well. I think that would be useful. That's all I have at this point, and maybe we can turn to comments. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Who within the city is the point person on the plan? Is that Sue Ellen? Yeah, okay, so if someone has a question about the plan or wants an update, can we refer them to you? Would that be?
Yes.
Okay.
We do have a comment form on our transportation planning webpage, and that goes to my team. But my contact information is within the staff report.
Okay.
Also.
All right, thank you.
Okay, with that, why don't we turn it to public comment?
Adam Lorraine.
Good evening, commissioners and staff. My name is Adam Lorraine. I'm a 20-plus year resident of San Mateo. Happy to be here tonight. I wanted to reiterate that I am aligned with the vision of the plan, and I'm excited by what's possible. But I very much appreciate this extra discussion that's going on tonight here at this commission, over listing the projects, quantifying their costs, and discussing funding and implementation, especially after what was revealed tonight. I had an opportunity to read a bit of a report from Mr. Mark Elliott, who I believe we'll hear from later, that was given to the commission and to other organizations, where and just reading over it made me very disappointed in how much of the opportunities from the previous plan we weren't able to realize. There seems to be a bit of different numbers, being quoted as to like how many are completely completed and how many are still in progress. But either way you look at it, there's still 10 projects that didn't get completed and didn't have much progress at all, that were high priority projects. And now we're aiming for a 70 project list that's 21 to 30 something $1 million with a fiscal year budget allocated of $50,000 this upcoming year. So I want to do anything I can to help us make sure that we can do a better job and implement as much of this great plan as possible. I agree with some of the recommendations that are within the report on that note. and those that were also listed in a letter to you from the Silicon Valley Bicycle Coalition. So definitely, whatever we can do to find annual funding for this beyond $50,000 would be wonderful. It sounded like there was a possibility to mention it to council. Maybe I missed an opportunity at our last Blue Sky to push for this harder. I realize there are other priorities for what is currently being funded through CIP, but I do think commission comments that we could use more than $50,000 would be helpful, and Commissioner Reyes's comments about figuring out that overlap on smooth streets and the rapid implementation project was also helpful. I would also just recommend that we implement a BPAC, a bicycle pedestrian committee outside of the SIC, and just overall start broadening this out, making this plan a higher priority than the previous plan was. The rapid implementation project network sounds great. I'm hoping that at the next update that comes from Public Works, we get a sense of some progress on that. So, and anything I can do to help, I'd be more than happy to. Thank you very much.
Sandhya Ladha?
Hello everyone, my name is Sandhya Ladha and I'm with Silicon Valley Bicycle Coalition. First of all, I'd like to thank you all for this opportunity to have this discussion and also present our thoughts about the Bicycle Master Plan. Overall, we like the intent and direction of the plan, and a couple of things that we really appreciate from the plan is the first recommendation that of setting aside 5% of road maintenance funds for bike ped infrastructure, having goals and matrices with targets which we can help measure the progress of the city, like having 5 miles done per year and having certain amount of ridership increase so that we can actually check the city's progress. And also, we really appreciate the formation of the Citizen Advisory Group and the Technical Advisory Group during the creation of this plan, and hope that the city will retain this even during implementation. A couple recommendations that we had and we hope that the plan can incorporate are, like, first of all, as also some of you mentioned, having a status update of the previous 2011 master plan incorporated in this plan in the introduction, or maybe a memo which actually talks about how many projects the city has completed, which are these projects, and how is the city doing in terms of, say, increase in ridership from 2011 to date. Since it is a bicycle master plan update, it is nice to have an update from the previous plan. Then another include a session, like a section, as you already mentioned, not just having estimates about roadway projects, but also having estimates of programming elements, because we focus on two parts. One is getting infrastructure, but the other part is actually getting people on the road, being feeling safe enough to bike. So it is necessary that we also focus on these programmatic elements, and it is important to have budget as well for these things, because it'll be easier for a person like you or the city staff or the council member to compare, like, where do we put our money into, which bucket do we focus on right now. Another piece was like also having the city focus on quality along with quantity. Because it is not about just completing or just checking off bicycle lanes. It is also whether after implementing a bike route or after implementing sharrows or bike signages, do people really feel safe? Because if not, then it is not serving the purpose at all. This is also a little bit on lines of what Mark Elliott has shared, that the city says they have completed 9 projects, but he says that the city has completed just 4 projects. Whom are we debating about? Is it more about, like, checking, having feathers on the cap, or is it more about, okay, yes, we have, with these projects, we have so many more people who now feel more safe to come outside on road and bike safely. So we would like to focus more on quality than quantity. Then for successful implementation of the plan, there are few vital things that the city should really focus on. And one of them is having like a dedicated bicycle pedestrian staff person who can focus entirely on implementation of the plan. It's a huge plan. It has wonderful recommendations. But if we do not have somebody to focus on it, how do we plan to complete it? And another piece is having like a dedicated bicycle pedestrian advisory commission. All of you are working on this already, but you have so many other things to focus on as well. But we need a dedicated commission who can focus on implementation of this plan and get things done. Then the funding pieces that you talked about, there are several other funding buckets, especially Measure W and A, that is coming up. Sorry if I'm time out.
Yeah, we need to come to closure, but please finish your thought.
Just like last 2 points. So it'll be nice if the city considers Measure W and AA funding, A funding, because there is funding kept aside for cities, and it has road maintenance funds, bicycle pedestrian infrastructure funds. So it'll be nice to include those in the numbers that you mentioned. I'm sure those numbers will increase drastically, and we can hope that more bicycle projects can get completed. So these are our few thoughts, and we've also submitted a letter to you guys. So let's hope that the plan does see the light of the day, and hope San Mateo is safer for biking. Thank you.
Thank you.
Michael Reagan.
Good evening. Yes, I was at the last meeting that we had, and it's taken taken back a little bit in regards to your response at the last meeting. But I do want to compliment the Public Works and the outside consulting firm on the excellent job that they did. I was on the bicycle committee, and we spent a lot of time working on this project. And as a citizen, a resident of San Mateo, I was under the impression that this project was implemented by City Council and that everybody was behind it. We all know that this project's going to be an expensive undertaking, but we all need to get behind the project, from you guys to the City Council, the Public Works, and to the residents. It's going to cost a lot of money. Some of the projects are simple and probably easy, and some are going to be quite expensive. But in the long run, it's going to benefit all of us to have a safe and joyful bike ride, or use it for getting around town and get out of our cars and that type of thing. So we have to look at the bigger picture rather than just, the nickels and dimes, which I understand, and I appreciate you guys wanting to know the costs. That's your job, and I appreciate that. But I think that, if we all make it a priority, as some cities go down to Palo Alto, Menlo Park, they made it a priority. They made it something that's important to them, and you can see the results. Go to Menlo Park when the school lets out. Hundreds of kids on their bikes leaving school in a safe environment, riding their bikes home. I've seen it. I've seen it a lot. Palo Alto, they have routes all over the place that enable people to get out on their bikes and get exercise and be able to use the safe and projects that they put in, the bike lanes and that type of thing. I know the City Council was behind it. We met with them, and they were in favor of the project. In fact, as I saw many of them out in the events that we had, and the resident, when we had the meetings in the different districts, they were there involved, and I know they're behind it. And I think you guys hopefully will pass this and let them have their input into it. How we pay for it, I understand that's going to be a major undertaking, but I do think in the long run, it's going to benefit all of San Mateo in the future. And hopefully, you guys will see the benefit of this project and get behind it as much as the committee and many people that I've spoken throughout San Mateo. So, thanks for your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Drew.
Good evening, members of the commission, staff, members of the public. So first off, I got 2 thumbs up for this plan. I think this plan, a lot of great stuff in this plan. I could go through a long laundry list of all the items that I just think this plan is touched. It's not perfect, but it's just a really solid plan when I look at it compared to some other plans I've seen and stuff. And I just want to thank the effort involved. I mean, because part of this led to just recently O'Farrell, there's development right across the street, O'Farrell, and this plan led to capturing and trying to reserve a little bit of space for the bike ped overcrossing on 92. It might take 20, 30 years before that happens, but try to reserve the drop down, the connection point right in front of this building. And this plan led to that. And there was staff I don't know, the magic they did to find the deeds that had some reserved right away and said, we need this because of the plan. And so that's important stuff. It gets lost, but I appreciate that's happened. And so, the micromobility lingo being incorporated all over. I was seeing it when I was reading it. It was like great. I would ask maybe like on the cover, it could also in parentheses or something get added. There's a few more places and stuff, just that lingo could get added, but it was promised and it got delivered and stuff. So one thing on the funding got brought up a little bit. I just didn't hear the discussion in this context was Measure W, though I think it's in the report, was just how that factors in. That's supposed to be a lot of money. I would think City of San Mateo is going to be looking good as far as just we have a plan, it's brand new, and Measure W is starting up. So one last thing that I think potentially can be incorporated at a minimum on this great page that's included long-term projects, and it talks about aspirational stuff. That's not, in theory, going to happen in the next 5 and 10 years, and that's fine, but it plants seeds. So I would argue potentially adding one more bullet. I don't think, it could be argued even a separate page, but the Caltrain business plan and grade step through San Mateo, the rest of San Mateo, Highway 92 north. There's 9 crossings. There's going to be opportunities for bike ped undercrossings through that, through some of those grade step projects potentially. And when you look at the cumulative cost, because of the business plan talks about 4 tracks for Caltrain, Hayward Park Station, Hillsdale Station, potentially to Belmont, that's $1 billion potentially spent in the city of San Mateo when this happens, upgrading some of those dollars. The opportunity that this bike ped plan, like having a bullet in there of how we would incorporate that kind of transformation, that kind of connectivity when that came developed. We can't anticipate it right now, but having a bullet, a sentence or 2 about that, I certainly can provide something like that. Or a page, we talk about that, because you can look at Pacific Boulevard and then down Delaware and then Railroad Street and stuff, and that almost the entire route could be a multi-use path next to the tracks. And there's enough right-of-way in general ultimately to do it and stuff if we think about it. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
That's all I have.
Okay. With that, we'll bring it back to the commission for further discussion. Commissioner Robbins?
Thank you. Yeah, just a few comments, largely laudatory. Thank you all. I'm a veteran, I think quite a few people here are, of the master planning process over years, and there's often a huge disconnect between the goals and the reality, and that's the nature of city planning, long-term planning, and the reality of funding constraints. So I think that the addition of prioritization, even knowing that that's dynamic and may well change, but that really helps inform the public to set out some more reasonable expectations so that as we have the follow-up meetings and people say, what, nothing's happened, this has happened, there's something to point to. I think that's excellent. And the rapid implementation program, to the extent that actually can get stepped up and funded, that would be fantastic to say, look, here's the goal is the Cadillac. That's an old-fashioned term, I guess, right? Here's the Buick, and it's out there already. So I think the plan's been good for a long time, but the latest iteration is that much better. And I think it's going to be a document that the city can be proud of and may actually turn into a reality that will better match the needs of the community than some other plans we have that are still on the shelf. So thank you. That's it.
Thank you for everyone who spoke. I like the way people all spoke real well and passion and everything else. I think it goes down to it's a shell game with funds, as Commissioner Robbins was just saying. Each city has its costs to bear. So whether you have a city like Palo Alto, Menlo Park, it's got its own funds and stuff we can't compare. But it would be nice if we could just magically have money come up and say, hold it. We can fix everything and make all these things work. I wish there was a way that we could do some kind of more budgeting and have overlays to see the difference between the years. I'd love to see more of an input by citizen groups that come up to here instead of saying that we have the funds. If we don't have the funds and we're looking at $50,000, we don't have the funds to have a designated staff member full-time on this and a few other projects. It's more when we do have funds and we are going gangbusters, that's where that input with citizens would need to be, stepped up. Until the funds are there, whether it's getting something who says we'll advertise, getting a company that comes in with mobility and says we have fees that will pay for stuff. It's just when you have so much overbearing cost as a Caltrans, as the, trying to get out of the flood zone and certain things like that, the city staff and the council has to do that juggling act. We can come up with everything in the world and say we want it. If the money's not there, the money's not there. But it's a great plan, any way you look at it. It's just a great plan. I wish we could just get her done faster. That's the only thing I say.
Yeah, I would concur. It is a very good plan, and appreciate the work and incorporating our input that was presented during the December 2018 meeting. Yeah, it's kind of frustrating, frankly, to have such a great plan and trying to figure out how to fund it. And I think, if we look at funding, I think Drew brought up some good points. Can we dovetail off of Caltrain's efforts, the user fees? And I think simply, as Mike mentioned, making this a higher priority. 50,000 for next year is kind of short. So, maybe if we all work with City Council, they'll be presented this plan. What date did you mention? March
2nd.
The March 2nd City Council meeting. It'd be a good meeting for everyone to show up and encourage them to bump up the fees for the, fiscal year 2021? Yeah, right, which is currently 50,000. With all that said and having such a great plan, I look forward to having this come back to our commission at least once a year for an update in terms of where we are on progress on funding, progress on projects. Thank you.
Great, thank you. One question for staff. There were questions raised about Measure W and Measure AA, if I understood correctly. Can you comment on those as prospective funding sources?
Measure W is for road purposes as well, so currently we're using that in our paving program. We are above the required PCI, where we could use some of that money elsewhere for other things.
PCI?
Pavement Condition Index. So I think it has to be 70 or higher, or 75 or higher. And that's a rating of the pavement condition throughout the city. But But right now, with the focus on the Smooth Streets program, we're using every dollar to accomplish that goal that the council has put forth.
Okay, great, thank you. I think, like others, I think there's a lot of great stuff in this plan, and if my fellow commissioners are amenable, perhaps we might consider, putting this forward, the plan forward to the council with a couple additional recommendations. My proposal would be, one, a memo with more specific detail on the progress on the 2011 plan. Number two, more detail on how much of the rapid implementation projects can be covered under current plans for the smooth streets and other components of the overall traffic plan. Number three, have this come back to the Sustainability and Infrastructure Committee twice a year for review. And number four, explore mechanisms for enhancements to increase the likelihood of reaching the 5% target proposed in the plan. And I'd like to hear comments from my fellow commissioners on their willingness to entertain those elements.
Yeah, I think they're all positives. I don't know that they actually fit within the plan itself. Maybe a couple of them do. I don't know that council is going to be interested in being dictated as to how often anything comes back to the commission. I think they'll laugh at us on that. So I don't think that's part of it. But the idea of maybe having some input on a little more input on progress on the 2011 plan and on the possibility of getting a rapid implementation plan program working would be useful. If I'd want to hear from staff that that's something they could easily do. Through the chair, if you're okay, Raphael,
Sure, of course.
Staff respond
to comment
on that.
If the desire is to bring that information to the March 2nd meeting, we can do our best to have as much complete as possible. And we will coordinate with the CIP team to determine what's on the schedule for paving projects insofar as they have that planned out.
Sure, of course. And just a point of clarification, the request for a review is not to the council, but to us, which we may make that request to staff.
If I might add just one quick thing to what Sue Ellen said, the paving program is also in and of itself dynamic. We have the smooth streets, which are segments that were identified in 2013. Those are fixed. But in the upcoming years, we're going to get another assessment done. The PCI results will change undoubtedly, and we may be reprioritizing. So what we look at today will then be reevaluated as we try to ultimately keep our PCI score up as high as we can, so we continue to comply with grant funding. So if it changes and the paving schedule and the segments change, we'll reevaluate accordingly. So just so that we're all aware that that actually is a dynamic process too.
Sure, and that makes total sense. And you'll want to put the appropriate caveats right over what that language is, but at least it'll give a sense of what the potential is. Perhaps other commissioners may wish to comment on items that I proposed.
Going back to a couple of points that Cliff raised, and by the way, I'm ready to send and recommend this to council. I think, once again, it's a great plan. I wish we had money, or we will get our money. We'll figure out some way. And coming back to us in the future, once or twice a year, possibly we could also have an update as it relates to, dovetailing off of smooth streets and paved streets. We've talked about anything that Caltrain might be doing might also be useful too. So, 2011, I hear what you're saying on the updates, and I've heard that from many of you. To some degree, I think they've been incorporated in the plan. It's kind of behind us, so I'm very lukewarm on that, personally. And I know it's important, and I get it, but I think we just have so many other things we have to do as it relates to implementation of this plan. I just can't see staff spending time on that. And I don't think it's so easy. People say to me, oh, we'll just take 5 minutes. No, nothing. One thing I've learned, nothing takes 5 minutes. So I think it's a great plan. We move forward, and we should all work as a group to figure out how to get more money and once again, to express this to City Council during their March meeting.
And Commissioner Warinsky, can you comment on the other items? So there were 4 items that I proposed: detail on the rapid implementation projects and the overlap, the memo in progress, review twice a year, and exploring mechanisms for reaching the 5% recommended in the plan.
So can you just run that by me again? Yeah,
Detail on the rapid implementation projects. Memo in progress, which you spoke to. Review twice a year. And then the 4th one was explore mechanisms for reaching the 5% recommended in the plan.
Well, like I said, you heard my thoughts on the 2011. Like I said, I think it's nice, but it's looking at everything else. I think there's a lot more value in looking at the 3 other items. And as Cliff said, it's really sending up to City Council the review once or twice a week. That's really within our domain. But I do support a review at least once a year, twice if necessary. So I could support the rapid implementation, the once or twice a year review here at our commission, and then looking at what will it take to get up to the 5% road maintenance, looking into fiscal year 2021.
Okay.
We can do, yeah.
Chair, if I may make a suggestion that a given time, and correct me, staff, if I'm wrong, the next step at council is actually a study session, right?
That's correct. We haven't brought the draft plan to them since the proposed bicycle network, so we need to walk them through the full draft plan, and that's what we'll be doing on March 2nd.
So with that in mind, and knowing that a study session is much more wide open as opposed to a, formal amendment, vote yes or no, that rather than tying staff up to do any of those things, laudable as they are, maybe what we do is we recommend that it go forward, and that our minutes or a summary of those statements can be put before City Council at the study session, just on paper, and then that these are things we'd like to see the plan contain, and they can nod their heads in agreement, and then it will get added between that meeting and the meeting when they vote. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I just think if there is a specific recommendation from the commission, and maybe there will or maybe there won't be, then that gets clearer articulation for the council in terms of the thinking of the commission. Commissioner St. Clair?
I agree wholeheartedly, at least being reviewed twice a year. Maybe not as detailed as we've done tonight, but more as an update projects where we stand. I firmly believe that we need to have an overlay and say where we've been, where we're going, and what's our time parameters in the future for that. Not even hesitation. I agree with Commissioner Robbins that we should probably have the information from here brought forward in the study session and say we agreed to this and what our comments were, and let them make that decision, even though we can agree to everything and they have to make the final. Now, mandating anything to them, because it comes to our lap, so we make the decision. We're the ones spending more time with it. We're the ones who, they can have compassion and everything else. We hear a lot more about it. I firmly believe that we need to do more, and we need to put something forward, but that would come out in the comments to the council. So that's my opinion.
And just to get a sense of the commission, Commissioner St. Clair, can you comment on the proposal to explore mechanisms for reaching the 5% funding in the plan?
Yes, I agree.
Okay. Then it seems like we have We have likely support on all 4 of those elements, I think. I know one person said no on the review or the memo on progress. I'm just trying to think what's the best way to handle this. We could take independent votes on these elements of the approval. We could approve the plan and then run through the 4 elements that I proposed.
Sure. Can I ask a question? Are you asking that staff present and a study session, by the way, is a very it's far more informal, and it's an opportunity for really everyone here to almost speak with City Council versus the formality of a meeting like this tonight. So I encourage everyone to go there to attend the meeting. But going back to, are you saying that are you suggesting staff would come up with a rapid implement?
No, the detail on the rapid implementation projects is just to say, given the investments planned for streets and the fact that there's sometimes overlap with what can be done on bikes, just providing some details so that there's a sense of how much overlap is there. So are we talking, over 3 years, 5 years, maybe, 20% of the rapid implementation projects can be done just with the traffic work that's already planned. That's not on the bike line item in the budget, it's in the other line items.
Right.
And then that gives a sense to the community to say, okay, well, even though we don't have a line item that says we're going to put, $3.9 million into the bike plan, we're actually going to cover 20% just by virtue of the other work that we're going to be doing.
Right.
And that's a material piece of information for the community.
Right, and I would agree. I think that's a material piece of information as we talk about funding, coming up with funding mechanisms. I don't know if is it possible?
Well, so let me make a
yeah.
recommendation for a solution. Number one, we will commit to bringing forward to you twice a year. That I can put that in the calendar, and that can just be a regular occurring item that comes February and whatever 6 months it is from now, right? So we can do that. Number two, the 5%, we can present to council what that number looks like right now. I'm happy to do that. I think that's a great idea. So in our presentation to council, we will point that out, right? That's one of the funding goals and what that number looks like. Let's see. Help me out with the other two.
So the other 2 items were a memo on the progress relative to the 2011 plan.
Yeah, I'm not sure what that gains us. I think there's been an analysis by, one of the members of the Citizens Advisory Group that was provided to people. We don't necessarily agree with that analysis. Just a difference in what you think completion is. So I'm not sure what good that is. Anything that wasn't completed is now in this plan here. So we're moving forward with those items, and then.
And I'm happy to defer on that item. There's obviously a difference of opinion on that.
I want to look forward, and we haven't. And the other thing that I struggle with staff is like, okay, should we use the word priority? Because people kind of take that as that's it. You got to do those priorities. Well, the priorities change, circumstances change. You don't always have the same opportunities. So. I lost the battle is still priority. I might have preferred preference or something like that, a little more wiggle room, but I wasn't going to die on that sword. They would have killed me. So no, but so it's just you can take a word and it can mean certain things, and it's just a little frustrating that you didn't get these 10 priorities done. Well, yeah, I'm sorry. We did our best to get what we could done. So that's why I don't think it's really beneficial for us to do that. And the last one was
the rapid implementation
projects. And I agree with you. I think we will take a look at the best we can before the meeting, and we'll present that to the council as well.
Okay. All right. Great. Thank you for that. So with that, I think that addresses those items that I proposed, and happy to entertain a motion if we've got one.
I'll move that we recommend taking this plan to City Council with the additional comments as the director just articulated them. Does that work for you?
Absolutely. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Agree.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, you've got the plan. So thank you very much for all your work on that. I know that there's a lot of work that goes on behind the scenes to put these things together, and hopefully we can charge forward and get some real stuff done. So thank you. So with that, we will turn to the traffic action plan review for Sugarloaf neighborhood.
I wanted to note really quickly that there were a couple changes to the report, the last few pages, so I'm going to be handing out a few revised sheets to youth commissioners, and I have a couple extras if anybody in the audience wants some.
It's hard to accept change. Thank you, Beth.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Bethany Lopez. I'm the Senior Engineer overseeing traffic. We are presenting tonight the Sugarloaf Traffic Action Plan. You guys may recall some of the other traffic action plans that we have presented here, and this is going to be very similar to that. I'm going to go over a little bit, just very briefly, the development process that we use for putting together these traffic action plans, and then I'll dive into the Sugarloaf Traffic Action Plan specifically. So as you see on the slide, we first have a community meeting. This has sort of evolved over time. This originally started with having the traffic forums back in 2016, but as new neighborhoods have become interested in this process, we've had to adapt this process over time. So now we start with a new community meeting, and in that community meeting or through other methods, the neighborhood or we will collect information about what the neighborhood's concerns are overall. So for the Sugarloaf neighborhood, we had a neighborhood meeting to introduce this, the traffic action plan process, and they went through a process of actually collecting the feedback via an online survey, I believe, and any other emailed information feedback that they wanted to receive from there. From that, we met with the steering committee, and we identified we identified the top items in their neighborhood, which are the top concerns out of all of those presented to them in the neighborhood feedback that they received. From that information, we draft the traffic action plan report. We're here tonight to review that report with you guys, and then we will finalize it based on any comments that we receive tonight. So Sugarloaf neighborhood, as you can see in the image, is actually a relatively small neighborhood, and you'll notice through the majority of this that there's a common theme of a major roadway going through this, and so we'll see a lot of the improvements focused on that primary road with a couple scattered here and there. As noted, the primary issues were speeding, some cut-through issues, and some pedestrian and sight distance issues as well. And just to make note of where this actual location is, this is sort of on the far west side of the city. This is off of State Route 92, just south on the De Anza exit. So the first item pertains to speeding on De Anza Boulevard. This is pretty much along the entire corridor. We did some studies on De Anza to try to determine what the prevailing speeds were out there, and determined that the speeds were high enough to qualify for speed cushions. Through an approval process, we discussed with PD, we discussed with Fire, and there were no concerns about us pursuing this option. And as it is one of the top concerns, we thought that speed cushions would be the best to address the speeding issue on De Anza. So along with the speed cushions, we will be, the police department will be providing enforcement of the roadway. The second issue is also on the De Anza corridor, and this one pertains more to cut-through traffic. You'll notice that De Anza connects to Glendora, and Glendora connects up to Hillsdale. So we do know that there's a significant amount of cut-through traffic that cuts through the neighborhood as they're trying to bypass State Route 92. For the recommendation, we think that the speed cushions will be a deterrent for that cut-through traffic. In an ideal situation, those vehicles would go back to the freeway and utilize the freeway instead. However, we are prepared to address any alternate routes that vehicles may take if that happens, if we see that happen. And as mentioned, we'll do some before and after traffic studies to determine if the volumes have decreased as a result of these speed cushions. So the third item pertains to speeding right at the De Anza and Parkwood intersection. Again, we've made the recommendation to install speed cushions in this area, with the first speed cushion being proposed just west of the Parkwood intersection. So it wouldn't be solely from Parkwood to Cherrywood. There would be one more between Parkwood and State Route 92. The fourth item is about pedestrian safety crossing De Anza Boulevard at Parkwood. We've made a recommendation to install curb extensions at this location. We've also made a recommendation to install rectangular rapid flashing beacons, or RRFBs, which you've probably seen around the city. We've implemented quite a bit of them through the traffic action plan process. In addition to that, we would install additional pedestrian warning signs and markings approaching this crosswalk. The fifth item is actually the side streets at the same intersection. So again, some pedestrian safety concerns crossing Parkwood at the De Anza intersection, and we're making recommendations to install crosswalk markings there. The sixth item has to do, again, with the De Anza Boulevard, and there's a concern about sight distance exiting the driveways. So as an overall conversation, I think, or we as staff think that the speed cushions will assist with some of the concerns exiting these driveways, because in theory, vehicles will be traveling slower and there'd be more time to anticipate those vehicles as they're exiting those driveways. However, we will, following the speed cushion installation, review the existing sight distance that's out there and see if there's anything that we can do to address that, which includes potentially installing red curb or trimming vegetation if needed. The seventh item pertains to bike safety on the De Anza corridor. So there's existing bike lanes in both directions on De Anza, and I believe they go from Parkwood and north all the way to Cherrywood. And so what we're proposing to do is, because those lanes are a little bit narrow right now, we would widen the bike lanes by a foot on either side, and that would allow us to narrow the travel lanes down to 10.5 feet. By doing so, it also provides a traffic calming measure. Narrower lanes tend to lead to slower speeds, so we think that this could assist in that effort as well. We'll also work on adding some center lines on De Anza. The eighth item has to do with visibility issues approaching De Anza from Parkwood on the southbound direction. And we're making recommendations for some warning signs to assist drivers in knowing that there's some stops coming up. The ninth item is regarding Parkwood Drive. So the concern was regarding speeding in the northbound direction on Parkwood Drive approaching De Anza. So this is the document that I made modifications to, and these are the changes that I handed out this evening. We were able to collect some additional information or collect some additional data and provide some dialogue for that in the report to assist with this recommendation. So we found that the speeds don't qualify the roadway for speed cushions. And so at this point, similar to other recommendations that we had made in other traffic action plans about speeding concerns, we will collect the speed again, we'll collect the volume again, and we'll review the clarity, but we'll ask them to add that to their routine list. We've also heard, in addition to just the speeding, that there were concerns around the curve of the roadway, which is sort of on the upper part of that segment, as the rectangular rapid flashing beacons to assist the pedestrian safety at the Parkwood De Anza crosswalk. So we have those on hand right now, and that's something that can be implemented very quickly. The other item, I think, and potentially the largest item, would be the speed cushions on De Anza, and that's, again, something that we can implement fairly quickly. So the recommendation tonight is just to review and comment on the traffic action plan for the Sugarloaf neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you, Bethany. Why don't we move to clarifying questions from commissioners? Commissioner Robbins?
Yeah, I have just one question, which is, it's actually just related to some correspondence regarding the adjacent neighborhood, Laurelwood. Did they show up way back when? I mean, my neighborhood, San Mateo Park, has been kind of lame as well, to be very candid about it.
I don't have information about if they showed up at the original traffic forum meetings. However, if there was interest from the Laurelwood neighborhood to pursue a traffic action plan, we're certainly open to that, and it would follow a process similar to the Sugarloaf neighborhoods.
And what should any concerned citizens in that neighborhood do? Reach out to Brad and it would get to you, or?
Yeah, they can contact me directly if they are interested, or they can contact Brad.
Okay, excellent. That was it. Otherwise, thank you.
Commissioner Rinsky?
Actually, Cliff did echo Mike. I want to hear from the folks at Sugarloaf, and obviously their comments on this plan, but where is Laurelwood? Do we know? Is it, I'm wondering if it's part of BHNA.
I don't think it is.
Okay. I have
this-
somebody here, somebody's shaking. Are you Mr. Ivanovich? Ivich, okay. Are you going to be speaking later? Okay.
So in this image, I believe it's the area just north of the neighborhood. So the neighborhood is shaded in the purple on the bottom,
Right.
and the neighborhood just north of there, I think, is the Laurelwood neighborhood.
Right, so is it between West Hillsdale and where Sugarloaf starts?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so that is Laurelwood. You know, I'm not sure if that is part of Beardsford. Anyway, I think, obviously, Laurelwood, I think, has raised some good points, and I think, basically some direction is working through you to put together a neighborhood traffic action plan.
So if I could comment on that, I saw the comments from Mr. Ivich today as well, and so I pulled out the map and I looked at it at a high level, 90,000 foot level instead of right at one specific neighborhood. And one of the things we did when we first started this program was we looked at broader areas, really, because, say, and I'll just say maybe the central neighborhood wanted really to look at Fifth and Humboldt, those streets or something like that, where we decided we couldn't just look at those, segments. We need to look more broadly throughout the neighborhood. And I would say that I missed the boat on this one, because obviously if you put speed bumps on De Anza, I think Mr. Ivich is right. There's going to be some cars that find their way a different way where they don't have to deal with that, right? So I'm more inclined to take a little bit of a step back and incorporate that into this plan. I don't know why we need a separate one. Yeah, I mean, I don't know how much of Laurel, I mean, I think this one street, obviously, I don't know if there's other issues in Laurelwood, but I think this one street would be most likely affected by whatever we're going to do on De Anza. So, I mean, that's kind of where I'm at right now.
And just for clarity, Brad, this one street you're talking about, Parkwood?
Parkwood, yes.
Yeah, that seems like it would be.
As
the
it
most likely.
goes, as you see on this map, to where the Denali Drive is, but it's that
Yeah.
direction. Bethany's drawn right along. It's that segment there that I think is the comment from the resident was correct.
And to add on that, if I may, we have already we already collected a sort of before traffic study to take a look at what the volumes look like in that area. So that way we can compare them once the speed cushions are installed to see, and we can do an after study, if you will, to see if there's additional traffic that has been diverted onto Parkwood. The result of that traffic study indicated that that roadway potentially qualifies for speed cushions right now if it were to be requested. So it's something that I think we could include and it would qualify.
Other questions? Commissioner Rowinski?
I think what I'm kind of hearing is the need, you can move forward with Sugarloaf and then start to put in Laurelwood, start the discussion, what I'm hearing sooner than later, and some rapid implementation. But let's see what Mr. Ivanovich has to say when he talks. Greg?
Thank you for your work. Question is, we just have a huge discussion with the Bike Coalition, and we're talking about $50,000 for a year. We talk about having 20,000 plus in staff time just to review and do all this, and we have hundreds of thousands of dollars in cost element here. Now, it's a tough thing when we've had such bad traffic coming off everyone trying to just get home. A lot of this traffic isn't people trying to say, hey, we're going to head to the bridge. We're not. These are people trying to get to the Hillsdale neighborhoods and trying to get down the hill because it's such a nightmare on 92. And when Hillsdale became a nightmare for people to come off the freeway, they started going this way because they're going to find the quickest way to get around it. And it affects all the people in both neighborhoods that are taking a beating on Glendora, Parkwood, and all the streets there, because if you've lived there forever, you see such a huge difference. It just ruins your neighborhood. Versus if you've just bought a house and you're getting used to it, you're saying, oh, that's what I got. My issue is spending money on bulb outs and stuff like that and spending $90,000 or signs if we don't have the people there that are using it in the first place. It's a great idea, but if we don't have the money, unless we have such volume of people using that crosswalk, then I disagree with that. If you're implementing a bike path to make a bike path wider because it's narrow there, I'd want to know what the study is. This is how many people use that bike path. If it's not used by a lot of people, then I would disagree. If they're spending that amount of cost, and the Bike Coalition would probably be saying the same thing, why aren't we putting it for where we get the better buck for it? I look at it, what works. I love the signage that says, hold it, someone's here on a busy street. But if it's so expensive to put it in, I have a hard time dealing with it unless we have the volume of people there. We just had it with Bay Meadows came to us, a brand new neighborhood with builder development fees and everything. And all of a sudden people who bought on the certain streets are saying, hold it, I want that cost. I wanted to go what is a normal 35 mile an hour to make it 25 because I bought on that street. And a lot of the items are police action, speeding, that kind of items. It keeps dumping on to say we have to have a cost to try to avoid other items when a lot of it is police action some neighborhoods, when we started the whole traffic action plan, are inundated, and now it's spreading out. We got to find a solution, but we can't find a solution with speed bumps or something like that can happen if you can just wall it off or not allow people to go in certain neighborhoods. But the solution to spending a lot of money if it's not necessary is the only concern I have. Thank you.
One question here, and thanks for putting this together. When we say short-term, what's the frame of reference here?
So for the RRFBs that I'm mentioning, we have those, like I mentioned, on hand. We can get that done in the next few weeks. For the speed cushions, it depends on availability. We've found recently that the availability is actually much better than it had been. There had been something along the lines of a 4 to 5 month wait for them previously. However, we're hearing more recently that that's just a handful of weeks. We'd still have to go through the approval process for that, but that could potentially be in by the spring, summertime.
Okay. Thank you. I have no further questions. Oh.
One final. Brad, we had talked in the past neighborhoods of temporary speed cushions and trying to find out if we did temporary stuff, how that would affect the neighborhood and get feedback from that versus going full bore. What's the difference between costs for a temporary versus a large application speed bump?
You want to answer that? Well, I'll just clarify one thing. We did intend to use them as temporary, but we're actually using them as permanent ones. They're the rubberized ones, so we're installing them. If they don't work well, we could take them out, but we've just left them in. They work well, and there's no reason to go put an asphalt speed hump in. So that's what we're doing. We initially started out we were going to replace them with asphalt ones, more permanent, if you will. But these are holding up well enough to where we feel that this is the solution right now.
And one follow-up question. When Bethany, when you say you're requesting the speed bumps, I'm a little bit unclear on who you're requesting them for. Is it that we're ordering equipment and it takes time so it's the equipment availability?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Any further questions before we move to public comment? Okay, I think we're ready for public comment.
Okay, Bob Kiss.
Good evening. Thanks for the opportunity to say a few words. I wanted to back up several years. In around maybe 5 years ago, our neighborhood petitioned for a stop sign, for a four-way stop sign at the De Anza Parkwood intersection to address, in our view, to address a lot of the issues that Bethany has just described, because a lot of them are centered around that intersection and the rate of speed down De Anza, which is hilly and has curves on it and a lot of homes. So you have issues with cars getting out of driveways when cars are coming fast down the hill, and the visibility might be limited. That was denied by DPW at the time. It didn't meet all of the criteria that were in the algorithm that was being used at the time. At that time, we discussed with DPW and we thought about appealing that decision as far as we could to see if we could get a decision even at the city council. But as we talked with DPW, they told us that this program was starting up to do these analyses and come up with traffic action plans. So we decided, okay, we won't appeal, we'll go through this process. It's taken a little bit longer than we might have hoped, but I wanted to praise the work of the Public Works Department and Bethany in particular for getting together with us, going through the process that she described, and getting to this point. We've taken the report and, over the last year, we've been trying to engage our community there. We've gotten the input. We've circulated the report that came out. It also was posted on Nextdoor, as well as the city's website. So we've provided the feedback from our community that we've received regarding the report, and we are happy to see the recommendations. We think it will make a real difference in safety along De Anza, both pedestrian safety as well as the traffic and also the bicycling safety as mentioned. And then the issue on Parkwood Drive is sort of unique. It's steep, it's curved, and the visibility is poor. So we think that what they're recommending will definitely make a difference in that area, and it seems like a good solution. So again, just wanted to thank DPW for the efforts and getting us to this point. I hope you will support the proposals, and hopefully the money will be available to get the work done. Thank you.
Thank you.
Larry Ivich.
Thank you very much. My name is Larry Ivich. My family and I reside at 1719 Parkwood Drive. And before I begin, I'm going to keep my comments brief because you were kind enough to allow me to submit my letter, and I think you understand how I feel about some of these issues. But I want to thank the commission. You guys do a lot of great work. As a 25-year resident and an employee in the city, my job is based here. I think San Mateo is a great place to live. We have the benefit of a great staff, and they're always doing great work. So I want you to know my family, and I appreciate that very much. And so thank you for all you do. Onto the subject at hand, I'm the first house on Parkwood that's in that little notch below the study area. So there's a little square that's missing, and that's me. 1719 is the very top house in Parkwood, just below De Anza. I have to tell you that when I look at the report, I have questions about several of the comments that are made in terms of conditions. I will tell you that people probably go down the hill occasionally in excess of 25 miles an hour. Rarely do they go up the hill in excess of 25 miles an hour. I wouldn't be anxious to have a speed cushion in front of my home because I've driven on the ones on 31st Avenue, which you can't go over at 25 miles an hour. You simply can't do that and control your car, and I would be concerned about one of those in front of my house because I don't want somebody losing control of their car and ending up in my living room. So these measures, I can't actually tell from the recommendations found on page 18 of the report that they truly meet the threshold. If I've got this right, they talk about 7 miles an hour over the speed limit, which would be 32 miles an hour, and a whole bunch of these are just barely under that. A couple are above, but I frankly think that some of the other things that are being proposed, including bike lanes, narrowing De Anza, some of the other, and good police work, some of the traffic calming measures that could be put in place without speed cushions, might well drop these down below the rates and make them fully acceptable. My goal is obviously not to have speed cushions on De Anza because I don't want them on Parkwood. I mean, I don't really feel that we have a situation where they're warranted. I don't care to drive over them every day when I leave my home or I'm coming home. I simply don't think from a quality of life perspective I like them. And I suspect that that's the reason why when you research it, you find out that a lot of neighborhoods, after they have them in for a while, say, let's take these out because they're not any fun to have around. So I'm not going to cover anything else. I think I have everything in the letter that I gave you, but I would be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you very much. Yes. Cookie, do we have any other comments?
One more. Michael Reagan.
Good evening. I just had to get up, and I think my comments are worthy. I was ahead of the traffic action plan on the Hillsdale area, which encompasses probably the largest area of all the action, all the different plans. I guess it was 10 different areas that they covered. I worked up in Parkwood area, up in the Laurelwood area. Have a beautiful park up there, great neighborhood, wonderful homes, and I understand their frustration. I come home on 92 all the time. I live on 31st Avenue, and so I see the difficulties of people trying to cut through their neighborhoods, and it's getting worse. And it's also trails down to Hillsdale, and it cuts through Hillsdale to El Camino, and now with 31st and 28th opening up, we're going to have even more traffic, people trying to cut back down to the freeways. So I think I think Mr. St. Clair made a great point about where to spend the money to the best, where it would help the most. I think that the money should be distributed amongst Parkwood, Laurelwood. If we're going to go to that extent of trying to improve the cut-throughs and all the other things that you have described, it's going to have to continue all the way down through Hillsdale, because we're inundated far more. We not only have the traffic from the Parkwood people cutting through to get to Hillsdale to come down, we have Hillsdale, we have Alameda, and we have all those situations at the same time. We've been trying to get a traffic light at Hillsdale and Alameda for the high school and for the traffic that we have for the last 3 years. We've got nowhere on it. But I do agree that they need some help up there. But I think the commission also should look at the larger picture of the entire area. How can we keep all these people from coming off the highway, the 92, into our streets and causing the havoc that they have? We've just got the speed cushions on 31st Avenue. Thank you very much. And they've helped quite a bit. There's no people going 50 miles an hour flying down the streets anymore. And it's really improved the entire neighborhood. But I would like to see it expand to all the other areas within that area, from the Laurelwood area down through our Hillsdale area. And if you guys could look at expanding on that, I think that would be an excellent way of proceeding on this matter. But I do agree that the Laurelwood neighborhood definitely needs some help, because I've seen people cutting through, and it is a problem. I think it's going to get worse. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's all I have.
Okay, thank you very much. Bring you back to the commission.
Thank you for everyone for your comment. Thank you, Bob. Thank you, Larry. Thank you, Mr. Reagan. I believe that I lived at one time as a kid in Millbrae, and we lived at the top of the hill. And to stop what we had as a problem, because people used to go down the hill, I'd ride my bike down the hill and wouldn't stop till I got to the school. There was one stop sign. Now I go down the same street and there's 5. It stops you every other block so that people can get out of their driveway, can do that. What about a stop sign? Would a stop sign have helped this issue before? Would this have helped these kind of things? It's those questions versus putting the overkill, because you can't affect one neighborhood as Laurelwood, Parkwood Street by putting something on another street where they just go. You have to work on both. I also don't believe about spending the money if it's not warranted. You have to say, do we have the traffic? Do we have the pedestrians? Do we have the bikes? It's great to put it in there because I want to see the neighborhoods protected. I don't want to see people speeding and cutting through. But if a stop sign is necessary, and maybe 1 or 2 speed bumps, because you don't want to have speed bumps going uphill, because it's not an uphill issue, it's a downhill issue. You don't want to have the neighbors hearing cars banging on these, or you don't have someone on Parkwood having everyone switch over to that street because they don't want to go down De Anza. So you got to have a balance to check with the people on Parkwood. What do they think if you're going to put this? And if we haven't done that, I think we're jumping the gun a little bit, even though we need to do something. And again, where the cost, where the cost is effective. I don't agree to bulb outs unless it's a super busy walking traffic area. That's just my opinion. Thank you.
I'm going to just comment, listening to Bob, and it looks listening to Bob, it looks like there's full support for the traffic action plan. Laurelwood, I think, begin a discussion and incorporate some sort of traffic mitigation, possibly stop signs, if cushions may not be the choice, but that's kind of out our preview. Yep.
I really think before you decide on these things, you need to engage the neighborhood and have the same kind of a discussion with them that have been had with others. I can tell you that I only stumbled across what was going on with the Sugarloaf traffic action plan because I'm a geek and I look at the city's website, but nothing came to my home to tell me what was going on. And I think when the changes are made along De Anza that precipitate a whole bunch of traffic into the Laurelwood neighborhood, along Parkwood, and then along Cherrywood, which is also important.
Right, yeah, I see that.
A bunch of people that feel as though nobody's asked us, told us, consulted with us, taken our input, and I think that's going to be exactly how it plays out. I think there are going to be a bunch of people that aren't going to be very happy.
Thank you. Yeah, and I don't think we're in a position right here to have a dialogue with individual members. So why don't we continue with the discussion here at the commission? Other questions?
Sure. So, look, a lot of work has been done on Sugarloaf. I think we need to do a Part B and start to include Laurel. I think they've been working on this for quite a while. So to put that on hold would not be fair to them. But I'm also very sympathetic to Laurelwood and would encourage the folks in Laurelwood to work with Bethany, and I think some solutions can come out of this. I want to talk. I think Mike raises a good point about the systemic overview. That is what does happen in Laurelwood, and I know that because I live just off of Hillsdale. Does impact down in what happens in Laurelwood does impact other parts of the city, particularly those of us that live off of Hillsdale Boulevard. And so my instincts would tell me eventually, once we kind of get done with all this neighborhood work, we're then going to start to step back and look at a much bigger picture. But, Brad or Matt, maybe you can address that.
Yeah, as I said today, I guess I missed the boat when I didn't take the 90,000 foot look at this, because I'm not inclined to make another. I'm sensitive because of the group that's met with us and worked with us on this document, but I'm also not inclined to all of a sudden have another neighborhood upset, right? So I think there's things within this that we could implement now, but I think that we ought to probably take a look at what things would affect the other neighborhood and probably not implement them until we have an opportunity to do outreach with the other group. And because really it's all integrated, right? And so that was kind of my comment about, larger area. Just because one neighborhood's called one thing and one's called another doesn't mean we should look at it in that manner. So again, I missed the boat on that. So I think there are a few things in here we could implement that don't have that kind of effect. Speed bumps along De Anza probably don't meet that criteria in my mind. In other words, those are the ones I'd want to slow down, at least maybe some of them. I think we were proposing one between 92 and Parkwood. Maybe that one could go in, right? So But anything that's going to divert traffic, I think we need to engage the residents that would be affected by that. And so that's kind of my recommendation as we go forward.
I want to add something to that. This is affecting De Anza, Parkwood, Cherrywood, and Glendora. I would think that before we did something that would affect those other streets, not every neighborhood has to have that issue, but if you're going to affect one block specifically and add to it, we need to get more of a feedback from those neighbors so that they don't show up to a meeting and start saying, foul, what you did after the fact, is causing us grief. Not to say that we don't do it, but how do we just put a stop to it and then move forward after we get some feedback from those streets? If we got a flyer, we got an input, we got a next door, somehow to get those people notified, like we had our citizen here say, hold it, I only came upon it because I was searching something. I don't think that that's right, because if they get affected and all of a sudden say, hold it, time out, we're having a lot more people here, what's going on with us? They find out they're going to say foul. The issue of, we had a commissioner before, it took her 7 years to have a stop sign put in her neighborhood, and as soon as it was, she was happy because people got hit by cars on bikes. So, but it took 7 years to get it, and it made a difference there. We got to try to do the thing that makes a difference and just try to get it done quicker, because traffic's a bear right now. That's it. So whatever we have to do from the city to notify the people on the streets being affected would be the isolation. Not everyone in the neighborhood has to be, adhered, because they have their own items, some difference. But we need to know the streets are going to get affected, like on Parkwood.
Yeah, what I'm hearing is what I think all of us know about traffic. It's always a whack-a-mole, and anything you do to fix one place usually causes impacts elsewhere. What I'm also hearing is, I think we all know the traffic action plans have been a great idea. Taken a lot of staff time, but they are actually showing real responsiveness to the neighborhoods, and that's a good thing. I'm confident, from what I'm hearing here, that staff will balance the impacts. It sounds, if I'm hearing correctly from the director, that the ability to review what can be done, that is items that can be implemented that are lower risk of collateral impacts can be done, and things that are likely to have a higher risk of collateral impacts can be reviewed, perhaps with notice to the potentially affected neighborhoods. So bottom line is I applaud the work that's been done and appreciate the sensitivity to the fact that it all has to interconnect. And that's we're not voting on anything. It's just our comments. So there we go.
Yeah, so if I may, through the chair. Yeah, I appreciate the comments and the public comments as well. I almost think that while we could go away and implement some of the ones that won't have a effect on potentially negative effect on others, that maybe this becomes more of a Parkwood/Laurelwood traffic action plan, and we bring that back to you. In the meantime, we can implement some of these things that don't have an effect on others, a negative effect on others. I think that's what I'm hearing needs to happen most likely.
Great. Thank you for all your work on this. I do have some questions. The issue of putting four-way stop signs on De Anza and Parkwood, it wasn't included. Apparently, it was previously suggested. Can you just, for our edification, can you comment on that? Why that was declined as a prospective measure?
Yeah, I'm not sure I recall working on that since I've been here, but if it was not approved, it would not have met warrants that are necessitated by the state as far as you have to meet certain aspects as volume and so forth in order to actually meet the necessary warrants to put a multi-way stop in. And if you just put one in that doesn't meet those warrants, you really put the city at risk if there's an accident or something there, because you're just deciding on your own to do something that's really not studied and evaluated by the state. And Bethany could probably add more to that.
I think that captured most of it. I believe for this particular location, it was just the side street volume was not sufficient or was not significant enough to qualify the roadway for an all-way stop. So there's some fairly significant volume thresholds that are identified in the California MUTCD for all-way stops, and all-way stops are supposed to be used for right-of-way control. So where you have a lot of vehicles approaching an intersection, it's utilized to assign, I guess, right-of-way for that. So we have specific direction in the state guidelines not to use it for speed control. So we get requests for that quite a bit, and we have to deny it on that basis.
But if we have neighbors who are requesting multiple times, if they get told no in the past and it takes a long time to do it, it's not the guidelines of the state, it's the guidelines of the city and its council and people like us that say, hold it, we need it. How can a city like Millbury, when I go back, have 5 stop signs on a, 4-way stops on the streets, and you go, hold it. They put them in for safety to slow down the people. And if the neighborhood's coming back with input that says we'd like it, times have changed so dramatically, we can't go by the old guidelines. Somewhat we have to adjust for ourselves, I think.
So, through the chair, that's correct. A body could overrule what the Public Works Department recommendation is, so the council could overrule us and that's, I think, Mr. Niss referred to is an appeal process, right? So, from my office, we will not be making recommendations where it doesn't meet warrants. So I think it puts a city at risk.
Yeah, and just for clarity, the risk
liability.
is litigation risk.
Correct.
Because somebody just comes and says, well, it doesn't comply with state requirements, therefore you shouldn't be doing it.
Yeah, if you have, I think if you have an accident there, right, that is caused by the multi-way stop, it's potential. Because what happens is, while De Anza has a high volume of traffic and Parkwood does not, people will just run the stop sign because there's never any side, or rarely, right? I don't come across side traffic very often, so I don't really need to stop there. And that's the danger. And accidents actually can be worse by putting those in.
A couple other questions. So with regards to some of the comments that were made about speed cushions and the frequency with which speed cushions are then requested to be removed, do we have any data on that?
For clarification, are you asking how frequently are we being requested for them to be removed?
Yes.
We do get some comments after they've been installed the very first time on a roadway and some concerns about it. However, we haven't had any sort of lasting feedback or any feedback, a significant amount of time after their installation requesting their removal.
Okay. So, and with regards to the questions raised earlier by Commissioner St. Clair with regards to bulb outs, volumes relative, volume of use relative to cost, any staff comments on that?
So just some initial thoughts on that are that similar to the bike network, improvements on a bike facility aren't necessarily being recommended because there's a significant amount of bikes on that facility. So improving the network, in theory, will allow for a potential for more bicyclists to utilize it if they feel safer. The same thing with pedestrian improvements at a crosswalk. People might feel more inclined to walk if they feel safe walking through that intersection. So the volumes may not necessarily be indicative of the need for a new location or for improvements at a location for this particular roadway because it's uncontrolled and because it's coming off of a freeway. We're making the recommendation to enhance the crosswalk as there were concerns about pedestrian safety. For other locations where we are requested to do flashing beacons, something along those lines, we do qualify them based on volumes, pedestrian volumes, if they're new installations. However, as part of a traffic action plan, we may be looking at, again, just making improvements to address some of the neighborhood's concerns.
Okay. Then a couple more questions with regards to funding and timing. So, in the plan, there's a column, the prospective costs are identified and then potential funding sources. So, but there isn't a lot of information here about what's the likelihood that these would actually get implemented. So is there any way to convey to the community, a sense of that? Is there high confidence, a lot of uncertainty given other competing priorities? Can we have some comment on that?
Well, we actually get Measure S money for this program, overall program with the several taps we have, so $250,000 a year. I'm not sure exactly what we've got earmarked for that at this moment in time. Bethany, I'm not sure if you had, if you want to just explain, because you had the rapid implementation ones or whatever, maybe your thoughts on what was going to happen there.
So for previous traffic action plans, we had, especially the initial 12 that we had put together sort of in the first 4 months of 2017, those had sort of all come out and rolled out at the same time. We were able to utilize all of those plans and come up with some short-term, mid-term, and long-term implementations for those. Because these last two have sort of come in after the fact, we need to reevaluate some of those priorities. So I think some of the there's some easier or lower priority items that can be implemented fairly quickly, and we have funding, again, as Brad mentioned, for implementation of these items. There's items like the bulb outs that we were mentioning that might take a lot longer because we might be requesting CIP funding for that. However, other things like sign implementation or curb, and striping, things like that are fairly low cost and things that can be implemented a lot more quickly. Mm-hmm. So the speed cushions do align with that as well. So they're relatively low cost and they can be implemented fairly quickly also.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And where I'm headed with that is that, I think for most people in these neighborhoods, certainly true in my neighborhood, there's a lot of anxiety around safety issues. And so conveying some frame of reference is, I think, important. And certainly we'll want to take, obviously there's a complication now with regards to the Laurelwood neighborhood and Parkwood Avenue in particular. But want to encourage staff to move quickly on those things that we can move on, number one. Number two, it would be quite helpful in the plans just as a general practice to articulate that short, medium, long, and give a frame of reference here. So I'm understanding based on prior comment that short is, 3 to 4 months sort of a time window. Is that, does that sound about right? Then medium, we're talking, what, a 2-year time window? Something like that? And then long is really uncertain because of competing needs and funding requirements and things like that. So if we could bucketize stuff in categories like that, I think that would at least give some sense of direction and expectation setting. And obviously staff needs to determine, what's reasonable based on all the competing priorities. But if we could do that, I think that would be super helpful. So that's all I have. I just want to bring it back here to other commissioners if there are any final comments.
I'm a firm believer that a lot of the traffic action plan stuff were police action, speeding, stop sign running, that kind of stuff. We even had it in a brand new neighborhood when Bay Meadows had issues. They were more concerned with people running the stop sign. It's still the same thing. I think before the city spends a lot of money on signage, flashing beacons, bulb outs on an area that might not be heavily used for pedestrians or bikes, that citizens should be asked whether a stop sign that they've requested in the past multiple times to city council members to see if it would work, to see if it would help. I would think that you would never put, speed bumps going uphill on streets that it's hard to even go up the hill in the speeds. And neighbors, if you're going to put speed bumps around their houses, they need to know it's coming, because they're going to be the ones who are going to fight and come here and say, well, I don't want to hear that noise. Whether it's temporary and you can pull them out, then you can get your answer. Or in the case here where on Parkwood, if you have a curve, if you put something on those curves away from a home, it would stop people from going. But time would tell if you put it in on the downhill, not the uphill. I'm a firm believer that not to spend the money, as a lot of neighborhoods came and said, well, if you're going to spend money and we just have money to burn, we'd like you to do 1, 2, and 3. It's different when you have safe routes to schools where you need bulb outs and you need stuff like that, or you have where a lot of traffic is and you have people can't see it, or it's unsafe because people are coming off the freeway and cutting down the street so fast. What's going to stop that? A stop sign. A stop sign stops that right now. People are going to stop at that stop sign. If they don't, it's a police action. And again, I don't know how many times we have lawsuits because people run stop signs and say, hold it, it's the city's fault for having a stop sign here because it's safe. I think that would be insane for your insurance company to start with and for lawsuits. So I would think that if we're not going to spend a lot of money, what's the cost to put in a stop sign?
Maybe $1,000, $2,000, probably less than that given staff time.
Versus $90,000 for a bulb out and signage that says, here's a pedestrian walking. If there's a stop sign and someone starts coming, they see the stop sign, they're going to stop, then they're going to see the pedestrian. If they're going to run it, they might run it when they don't see someone, but most people aren't going to be running stop signs. That's my opinion.
Okay, with that, I think you've got your comments. Not quite.
Okay. We had an NTAP update, I think it was the fall. Was it the fall? Fall of 2019? Yep. And are you supposed to go in front of, did you update city council yet? Or is that being planned?
It's being planned for March, mid-March.
Mid-March, okay. And I'm just going to pick up a little bit on a comment that Raphael made, is maybe to help them kind of get their brain around all the work that's been done, not only on the initial 12 neighborhoods, but we had Bay Meadows in December, the fall too. I think it was the same meeting, if I recall. And today we have Sugarloaf and Laurelwood. And I would include them in the mix. And going back to a comment or a discussion that we've talked about is possibly taking all these projects and categorizing them into short, medium, and long. I think that would be a lot easier for them to get their brain around it than when you had presented to us, which was a little bit overwhelming. And then I would like to see that presentation maybe back here, because I think it would be easy for us to digest that, but I would include Bay Meadows, I would include Laurelwood and Sugarloaf in that as well. So.
I would support that as well. All right, thank you very much. Thank you all for your comments. With that, we will move on to announcements.
Yeah, I just have an update for upcoming meetings. The March 11th meeting, currently we have the small cell master license agreement. And in April, that's the only item we have in March right now. In April, we have 3 items. There was the trash, reassessment of the trash areas within the city, high, medium, and low trash areas. And then the climate action plan, and the REACH codes. I'm going to check with my staff to see if we can move the trash reassessment to March and see if that way we can balance things out a little bit better. And then, so I'll thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. Any other announcements from commissioners? Comments on items on the future items to agendize? Hearing none? Okay. Shall we take a motion to adjourn?
Move adjourn.
Second.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Thank you.